Yeah, great. And for anyone who's just come in, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from. I think there's lots of people from around sort of the larger triangle region, but I think there's some people from broader that wanted some more information as well, which is great. So with that, I'm going to hop into some details on the grant. So starting high level, just trying to understand what the grant objectives are, EPA lists out 5 broad objectives for this grant. 1, to provide resources for community-driven projects. This is mostly through their funding, but also some technical assistance as well. They're investing in strong cross-sectoral collaborations, and throughout the grant, they really emphasize this. They want to help build these cross-sectoral collaborations between government and communities, higher education, and other partners as well. They want to help unlock additional resources, so leveraging these funds for other funds, whether they be other federal funds or foundation funds, whatever it may be. They want to empower communities and strengthen their capacity to drive meaningful change. And then they want to strengthen community participation in government decision-making as well. So some key information to know. The technical application deadline is November 21st of this year. It's a little bit misleading though. So this is a sort of a new style of grant that EPA is rolling out, and they're accepting applications on a rolling basis. So you can put in your application whenever, and EPA will start looking at it pretty soon after you give it to them. So it may, because of that format, it may be that funding could run out before the deadline. So it really behooves anyone who's thinking of applying to get that application in as soon as they can. You don't want to rush it, but if you wait until November 21st, there may be the chance that there are no longer funds available. The duration of a grant project, the period of performance, as they call it, is 3 years maximum. So there's no extensions available for this grant. They're providing between $10 and $20 million per project for track 1, and we'll go into what these different tracks are. There's 2 different tracks for the grant. For the first track, it's $10 to $20 million per project, and for track 2, it's $1 to $3 million per project. Most of this presentation will be about track 1, but in the next slide, I'll go over that. They're starting to review applications starting this month, with selections being sent out next month, and then funding for those initial projects selected beginning in May and June. So they're trying to move things pretty quickly here. And so that's, I assume if you're on this call, you're probably not putting in an application in that early initial review, but just to give you a sense of how quickly they're trying to turn these funds around before November. And then it's something to keep in mind is all the benefits from this program really need to flow to disadvantaged communities. They're really emphasizing that. It's a really big part of this program, and we're going to go into what counts as a disadvantaged community. So the 2 funding tracks. Track 1, they're calling community-driven investments for change. And this is really the primary emphasis of the program. Almost all the funding is going into this track. And it's really focused on getting shovels in the dirt, really project implementation, making things happen. It doesn't have to be a construction project, but it is past the planning stage and to the implementation stage. They're going to fund about 150 of these projects at, as I said, $10 to $20 million per project. Track 2, they're calling meaningful engagement for equitable governance. And this is more focused on the planning processes and integrating community organizations, communities into government decision-making in a meaningful way. They're going to fund about 20 of those projects at $1 to $3 million per project. And again, this webinar is mostly about track 1. If you're interested in track 2, feel free to reach out and we can have a conversation about it. So one of the most important things about this grant is disadvantaged communities and understanding how they're defined by EPA in this instance. So for the most part, every disadvantaged community, how they're defining it is going to be located on a specific tool that they've released called the EPA IRA Disadvantaged Communities Map. So they've created a tool that combines a bunch of different other metrics around social vulnerability into a single tool. And so it looks like this image on the right. where you have blue census tracts and orange census tracts. For the orange census tracts are the ones that they've labeled as disadvantaged and where the funding should flow from these programs. So for the most part, if you're wondering whether an area you're interested in is in a disadvantaged communities, this map is how to find out if it is or not. There's some exceptions, including if you want to work with farm worker communities or disadvantaged unincorporated communities. And again, we can talk about that, or you can ask a question about it today if you'd like. But I think for 99% of the projects, you'll be able to understand where the disadvantaged communities are in your region based on this map, which I have linked in this slide. So we'll send that out afterwards. So who can apply for this grant? Another way that this grant is a little bit different is it really focuses on community-based nonprofit organizations. And they lay out what those are. You have to be a nonprofit, first of all, and you have to serve community in some sense. It's pretty broad, but they really are looking for local, place-based organizations. And so to apply, you need what's called a statutory partnership. And I apologize for the sort of grant speak here. This is the wordings that they use. So the statutory partnership is made up of a lead applicant and a statutory partner. One of those needs to be a community-based organization. The other partner, it can be either the lead applicant or statutory partner, needs to be another CBO, a federally recognized tribe, a local government, or an institute of higher education. So the difference between a lead applicant and statutory partner is really that the lead applicant takes on a lot of the financial management of the grant. So they're the one that will receive the funding. They'll do all the reporting, all that sort of financial back end stuff. With a statutory partner will likely be more sort of working on the implementation in the field side of things. So that's sort of how they break it up. There's a lot of different ways to break up responsibility between the lead applicant and the statutory partner. And again, the CBO or the other partner can be either one. They're not locking it in particularly, but there do need to be two partners, and one does need to be a community-based organization. EPA understands this is a large amount of money, between $10 and $20 million, and so it's likely that more partners will need to be brought in to collaborate on the implementation. So they have what are called collaborating entities that sort of sit under the statutory partnership. And these can be a pretty broad range of organizations, other CBOs, it can be other local governments, it can be state agencies. So it's pretty broad in what they can be. And then for other work sort of underneath those collaborating entities, you can contract out work as long as you're using the correct procurement channels. But this is sort of the rundown of how the grant is structured after they provide the money. So what is required in applying? There are 6 main parts of this application, and we're going to run through most of these, some in more depth than others, and some are more important, honestly, than others as well. So one is the climate action strategy, how you're going to go about addressing climate impacts, pollution reduction strategy, community engagement, collaborative governance plan, community strength plan, readiness approach, and compliance plan. And we're really going to be focusing a lot of time more on these first 2 points here, the climate action strategy and pollution reduction strategy. If you don't have a handle on those, it's really hard to move forward with the application. So there are 8 climate action strategies that cover a really broad range of projects that communities could use to address climate impacts, whatever they are in your specific community. So I'm going to walk through each of these with some examples of what they could look like. So one is green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And so actually, I will also say, so at least one of these need to be included in your application. More than one is possible, but at least one needs to be included. First is green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So this is using environmental features to help lessen some of the impacts of climate change. So like planting shade trees to reduce extreme heat, restoring wetlands to reduce the impact of flooding in a community. 2 is mobility and transportation options. These are the deployment of low emission transportation options like bike lanes, like electrifying fleets, to help reduce emissions in the community and hopefully improve air quality. 3 is resilient housing and buildings, which is a really big category, includes a lot of potential projects, but could include energy efficiency upgrades and cool roofing options so that lower income housing isn't feeling the impact of those extreme heat days as much potentially, or isn't as energy burdened. 4 is microgrid installation. So microgrid is a single or collection of buildings that can separate from the main grid, from the main electrical grid, so that in an emergency, they can run sort of self-sufficiently and maintain power when other places aren't. 5 are community resilience hubs, which are community spaces, which have upgrades to them and have investments in them, which allow them to run during disasters and help with disaster response and recovery often. So that could be, adding emergency communication systems, building retrofits to make sure that they are able to be up and running during a disaster. Often these places are libraries or community centers, places that are already central to communities. Number 6 is brownfields redevelopment. So brownfields are places that have been contaminated due to industrial uses of some kind. This specifically is about, they're not funding actual cleanup of brownfields, but if a cleanup has already happened, these can help fund redevelopment efforts, including greening or acquiring land so that the city or an organization can redevelop it. 7 is waste reduction to support a circular economy. This is reducing the amount that we're sending to landfills that have greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere that contaminate potentially water or communities. So that can look like implementing a compost program, reducing emissions from food waste. And then 8 is the workforce development to reduce air pollutants. So we know that there are a lot of new technologies springing up to support a lot of these solar efforts, other new green efforts. And so this is about funding opportunities to bring those jobs locally to communities that could use them. And so, yeah, it could be building partnerships, building training models, recruitment and retention strategies as well. So that's a lot. Those were the 8 climate action strategies. You also need to add at least 1 pollution reduction strategy to your project. So there are 4 of those to choose from. Again, they're pretty broad. A lot can fit under them. 1 is indoor air quality. 2 is outdoor air quality. 3 is clean water infrastructure. And 4 is safe management of hazardous waste. So I have some examples under here. Again, you can imagine what a lot of these would include, but again, they don't hem them in. There's a lot of opportunity to be creative with these and add multiple ones that could apply to different projects that you're interested in. So what does an application include? It's a long application, as most federal applications are, pretty intensive, just to be clear with you. The most important part is the project narrative. It's 20 pages, includes a lot of things, including those pollution and climate action strategies and how you'll tackle those, includes a budget. There's a project area map. There's community engagement and collaborative governance plan, which is 10 pages maximum. The community strength plan shows how you're going to benefit, how this project will benefit the community and how it will avoid harms like displacement from the activities that you're going to be doing. The readiness approach, which just shows that you're ready to hit the ground running as soon as you get the grant, and then a compliance plan on how you're going to follow all the requirements and regulations of the grant. So this is the criteria of how they actually score your application. And I think this is a good thing to look at early on because it really shows what EPA cares about, what they are weighting the most in all the things that they're looking at. And I'm not sure if you can see my mouse on here or not, but under 1.2, you can see selected strategies, which are those climate action strategies and pollution reduction strategies. Out of 155 points, they score that one out of 45. So it's by far the most important part of this application. Really important to figure that out and get that right before moving on to other things. After that, they really care a lot about the community engagement and collaborative governance plan, and that's 15 points. So understanding how you're going to be working with your partners, working with the communities to make this program work. And then the programmatic and managerial capabilities and resources, just showing that you have experience, that you have been awarded grants before, that there are people on your team that can help support you through the process. And there are other important things on here too. I think those are just the top 3 to really keep your eye on when you're starting to think about putting together an application. So 3 main takeaways. I think 1, the focus for your projects have to be on disadvantaged communities. They make that very clear in their notice of funding opportunity that those are the communities that they want to support. And maybe you can have something a little bit that is right on the border of one, but not in one. But for the vast majority of parts of your project, it needs to be based in these disadvantaged communities. Number 2, think locally as possible. EPA is really prioritizing projects that cover a smaller footprint. So it's a lot of money to spend in a small area, and I've heard that from people I've been talking to. So I think, spreading out to a county is fine, maybe 2 counties, but I think bigger than 2 counties, you're really pushing what they would like to see, which is these local projects in disadvantaged communities. And 3, I would say don't hesitate to reach out for support. In Liza's presentation, you'll hear more about resources out there. My organization, Central Pines Regional Council, is available to provide advice and resources. It's a big application. It's not easy to do, especially on your own. Feel free to reach out and ask for help if you need it. And with that, I will stop sharing and pass the mic over to Liza.
Thanks, Langston. Hi, everybody. My name is Liza Crichton. I'm the Federal Resources Coordinator at the Southern Economic Advancement Project. I am Tennessee-based, but I'm very glad to be with all you North Carolina folks today. So thanks so much for having me. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully y'all can see it. So the Southern Economic Advancement Project, we were founded in 2019 by Stacey Abrams to advance policies that improve the economic security, healthcare access, and environmental justice for all Southerners. We work with policy thinkers and doers across 12 Southern states to bridge gaps between policy, implementation, and funding. And we've engaged on this work in federal funding and equity and fiscal decision-making since 2020. We've provided toolkits and support for local governments and community-based organizations across the South. We've taken a broad approach by focusing on the development of materials, education and awareness, research and data collection, and federal agency engagement. So this is examples. Our ARPA toolkit was developed to ensure that there was an equity-informed, community-first approach to delivering recovery funds. And it's still up on our site, and there still may be ARPA funding available in your community. So if that's something you're interested in, you'll find it on our website. And with the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act, SEEP then developed the federal funding outlet, also on our website, which includes a federal grant finder, learnings reports, and a new funds tracker. But in 2024, we're seeking to refine our approach by going more deeply into select communities to work with Southern leaders and change makers to unlock the full potential of all the climate action infrastructure investments on the table. So who do we work with? Well, the short answer is we work with anyone, anywhere interested in advancing equity in the South. This usually takes the form of local governments, community-based organizations, coalition groups, and our partners in the think tank and policy worlds, federal agencies, and the philanthropic sector. So through our new 2024 initiative, we are currently supporting applications for the Community Change Grant. So you'll see that we are able to provide a number of pro bono services to Southern communities who are interested in applying not only for the Community Change Grant, but a whole host of federal competitive grants. So what our initiative does is we help match Southern leaders with specialists that offer a wide range of technical assistance, including grant writing, energy consulting, data and research collection, capacity building, and long-term strategic and organizational planning. Our primary goal is to help Southerners develop competitive grant and loan applications and strengthen our local, state, regional, and national partners. But of course, we're here today to talk about the EPA Community Change Grant, which we are supporting applications for. And I just want to talk through some key considerations as folks on this call are either working on project formation, securing partners, or building an application for both track 1 and track 2. And then at the end, we'll review some resources really quick. So just as a reminder, as Langston said, these track 1 projects are intended to fund very large, multifaceted projects that will be awarded significant money, which will require very substantial organizational or institutional capacity. So a few things to keep in mind as you are building out projects and applications. So as Langston explained, these are place-based grants, and place-based approaches are collaborative in nature, and they're long-term approaches to building thriving communities, but they are delivered to a defined geographic location. So this approach is ideally characterized by the community having an active voice in the agenda, design, stewardship, and shared accountability for project outcomes and impacts. And as Langston mentioned, applicants for the Community Change Grant must include a detailed map of their project area, as well as narrative writing describing the community. So applicants that can demonstrate a strong history of engagement and impact in their defined project area will be at a tremendous advantage. And communicating how your project will benefit the localized climate impacts, risks, pollution, and economic disinvestment of the community is of the utmost importance. And for these reasons, partnering with grassroots organizations is greatly encouraged. Integration of partners and strategies. The funding notice also speaks to the preference that applications present an integrated or circular approach to their project. So you want to make sure that the partners you bring in, the climate action and pollution reduction strategies and services you deploy, and the community benefits that you seek to gain make sense both holistically, but also for your defined project area. Systems and capacity building. These grant projects must be completed by the very latest 2027. So as you consider projects and develop your applications, you really want to consider taking on projects and drafting narrative storytelling that articulates how this grant will build systems and capacity that will extend beyond the life of the grant. You want to be able to answer how this project helps community members build resiliency, power, and self-determination that will carry long-term benefits for your defined project area. And again, as Langston mentioned, shovel-ready, very short life cycle for this grant, and the EPA, rightfully so, needs assurance that the project can get done in that time frame. So what does shovel-ready, though, mean in this specific context? Well, it should mean that you have had completed your planning and design phase of your project, that you've obtained or are working on the necessary approvals and permits for the project, and that you've sourced your subcontractors as needed. And I want to mention this is a rolling application, so of course you want to take that into consideration, but you also really want to heavily consider the readiness and the ingenuity and integration of your selected strategies is graded very strongly in the review process. So maybe it's better to have it right than early. And then lastly, of course, organizational capacity. The lead applicant and statutory partners are going to have a pretty tough evaluation process on their programmatic and managerial capability and resources. And this may be a roadblock for some of our grassroots organizations This is where regional and national nonprofits can step in, localities, and of course, higher education. So you're going to need to be able to demonstrate effective project management of similar projects in the past. You have the internal policies and controls to effectively manage taxpayer dollars, and that you'll be able to comply with all the compliance requirements in the funding notice. So quickly into track 2. Again, just as a quick refresher, these are more of a mid-size, but still multifaceted engagement projects. They will be awarded a lower dollar amount than track 1, but are still pretty sizable and will require reasonable organizational or institutional capacity. And also want to quickly mention the EPA estimates only about 20 of these track 2 projects will be funded across the entire United States. So very, very competitive. So first is methodology. So how your organization plans to reach and engage with disadvantaged communities. What is the plan to interest residents and engage them on 1, environmental justice causes, and 2, how do you get them to engage in government, an institution that usually does not have the most trusting relationship with communities at times historically. So how will your methodology also be informed by the specific history of the community you seek to benefit? Collaborating entities, there's a really big emphasis in the funding notice that EPA wants assurance that your plan and your partnership can get everyone to the table. How will you facilitate relationships and build trust and accountability between communities and government officials? What collaborating entities can you bring with you to build a network of stakeholders, from community members and organizations, government, utility systems, the business community, other nonprofits, education, legal, etc.? Who's coming with you to engage? Meaningful input and feedback. Can you demonstrate that there has been meaningful input and feedback considered from the community in developing your application? How will you ensure it continues during the grant performance period and beyond? And then lastly, same kind of deal as track 1, that organizational capacity. You're just going to need to demonstrate that the lead applicant and statutory partner have the internal controls and policies in place to manage the finances. So we want to add in quickly, because we're partnering obviously with the regional Central Pines Regional Council, just touch really quickly on some reasonings why localities would make good community change grant partners. Obviously, there's vast institutional knowledge and technical assistance that localities can provide, whether it's through the planning and implementation stages. There's also a great amount of subject matter experts, right, who either like work in a utility systems or municipal government or in a housing authority or a transit authority. And they're also tapped into professional networks. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge that they can provide. Capacity support. This one seems pretty obvious, right, that they can assist and step in with some grant and financial compliance and project management. Resources, I think all of these could be identified as resources, but we were thinking resources in more of a tangible way. So some of the interesting ideas that we've seen out there so far are localities either willing to donate community centers for retrofitting projects, or perhaps they have blighted properties or vacant lots on the tax roll, and you can donate them to nonprofits who then in turn can use these grant dollars to turn them into thriving community and green spaces. So there's other types of resources besides just money and people that localities have. Oh, and of course, when we say localities, I also want to think of our local school systems as well, right? A lot of energy efficiency projects can be done in our schools. And then lastly, key partnerships. Localities often have very close working relationships with other institutions, with the financial sector, state and federal lawmakers, and contractors and vendors. And lastly, Langston, I'm wrapping up. So what resources are there out there? So we'll start with the federal resources that the EPA has provided. So they've created an EPA community change website. which is all community change grant, and that's at the top there linked. And the EPA cannot, unfortunately, help and assist with applications, but they can be there to answer questions if you have them about the funding notice or where to get further assistance. But we can also tell you that the EPA and the Department of Energy have set up environmental justice thriving communities, technical assistance centers, also known as TICTAC. So if you hear that TICTAC, that's what it's referring to. EPA Region 4, of which North Carolina is a part of, your EJ Center website is react4ej.org. And on there, you are going to find each state is partnered with a university that will be offering technical assistance. And we recommend that you go directly to your state-specific provider. And then lastly, wanted to plug Environmental Protection Network. They are a national TA provider. They're a wonderful organization. They're former EPA employees who now donate pro bono hours to helping on environmental justice causes. So if you click the link in there, that goes to their interest form, and you can put yourself down as interested and wanting to talk to someone about your project or your application. But what it also does, it connects you to a partner network where you can see people from all over the country. Funny story, that is how I found Langston and Central Pines Regional Council. So it does work. And quickly, I also just want to talk about some of SEEP's resources that we have available. So we've designed 2 spreadsheets to help local governments and community organizations with their community change grant applications. So first we have the federal grant readiness checklist, and that is just going to go through the very nitty-gritty. Do you have your SAM? Do you have your grants.gov registration, your tax ID, your IRS determination letter? Do you have the internal policies and procedures in place? Do you have a board? Do you have an audit? Do you have a budget? All the very nitty-gritty parts of applying for federal grants. And then if you pass that and you're ready on your way, we have our decision tree, which is a basically blueprint breakdown of the funding notice. And that will let you know if your project, if your partnership is in line with the grant, and if you're ready to get started writing it. And then I also wanted to link to our website. We have more information of the work that we're doing and how we're supporting communities with this grant. But on our website, you can fill out our interest form, let us know about your organization, your project idea, and we can get in touch. And we also have a link up there. We're hosting twice a week office hours where anybody can sign up and get connected with a member of our team, probably myself. And we can just workshop and have a brainstorming session about your project, your application, and see if there's a way for SEEP to support it. And very, very finally, we just wanted to very quickly plug that if this opportunity seems not perfect for you and your organization, or just a little bit too much, there are some other great environmental justice and nonprofit federal government grants in the pipeline. So the first is those TICTAC's grant making program that should go live in the summer of 2024. The EPA selected 11 of these grant makers that will receive $600 million to serve as pass-through entities nationwide. And they will provide subgrants to community-based nonprofits and other eligible subrecipients for assessment, planning, and project development activities. So maybe you do know that you want to work on a community resilience hub, but you haven't planned it. You haven't had the conversations with partners or the community, and you are not ready for the EPA Community Change Grant. This grant making program is for you. And then very lastly, Department of Energy has launched a $50 million Renew America's nonprofit program, and it will reduce carbon emissions, improve health and safety, and lower the utility costs at buildings owned and operated by 501c3s. And so the link on there will take you to their site where you can join their interest list. And they've already announced and awarded the primary grantees, and in Region 4, that's the South Face Institute based in Atlanta, Georgia. But you can sign up on their website and say that you're interested in receiving a subgrant. And then just want to close out, remind y'all that my name is Liza. I work at the Southern Economic Advancement Project. We are supporting apps in this and all federal grants and all types of funding opportunities for folks in the South. So there's my email. Hope y'all will get in touch, and thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Liza. Thanks for sitting through that, everyone. I know that's a lot of information, and I'm sure at least some of you are like, well, what do I do with that? What are the next steps? I think as Liza said, the timeline for this may not work for everybody. There are other opportunities, but I think it's a good chance to start having those conversations. How do we link the work that nonprofits and local governments do so that when funding like this becomes available, we're ready to take advantage of it. It doesn't happen every day, but it will happen again. And we want to again make sure that people that are doing great work like you all in our region can take advantage of this funding to help grow your work and expand it wherever it's possible. So with that, we'll start the Q&A session here. We had a couple in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand as well. And we'll get to as many questions as we can in the next 16 minutes or so. So we had one question about permitting. Do orgs need to be actively pursuing permitting? And why would they want to spend money to do that if they aren't sure they're going to have funding? I think my reaction to that is you should be having conversations first. Again, this is why local governments, I think, could play a big role in this. They understand their permitting processes and how long that will take. Really, they want to, in the funding opportunity, they want you to be ready to start the project within 120 days of getting awarded. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have everything lined up and ready to go as soon as you get it, but you do need to have that process started. So again, I think, if you want to do a project and it was going to take 2 years to permit, you had a conversation with, local government, they said it's going to take 2 years to permit. This might not be the opportunity for you. Again, it might be good to continue having that conversation. But yeah, so I think, yeah, great question. And I think it sort of depends. Yeah, Katie.
Oh, feel free to do the ones in the chat first. I'll see if it gets answered before. Yeah.
We have another question from Ezra about Virginia 501c3 organizations being considered. Yeah, so nationally, if you're a 501c3 and you support local communities in some way, you are eligible. Education-based initiatives definitely can be eligible for this. They certainly, in several ways, they mention as examples of how to address air pollution or indoor air pollution, right? Some of it can be an education campaign around what homeowners can do to address things. So I think education-based initiatives can certainly play a part in this. It may not be the entirety of it. It could be for a workforce, but yeah, I think it's definitely on the table. Liza, anything to add there?
No, I think that's definitely right. Although I think would want to consider the very substantial climate action pollution reduction requirements in track 1. But I think that track 2 definitely, and as we were saying, they are looking for a holistic integrated. So I think it would be a great opportunity for them to partner with somebody.
Katie, I'll swing it back to you.
Thank you. I guess my question is about the differences in types of projects between type 1 and type 2. I guess at the core, my question is if we don't the partnership doesn't have capacity to manage the amount of money for a type 1 grant, but we want to do that type of project, can we apply for a type 2 grant, or it has to be really a different focus?
It's gonna be pretty, all right, go ahead, Liza.
Yeah, it's spelled out what a track 2 application looks like, and it is very engagement specific. I think that there could be opportunities to say, you know, if you wanted to do a capital project or you were looking to buy heavy equipment or land, I think there could be very creative, innovative ways to bake that into a track 2. But you would have to really connect the dots of how that would get citizens more engaged in local government.
Yeah, Nisha.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try and lower my hand while I talk at the same time. But I was thinking about the track 1 versus track 2, and I'm glad you guys raised that as a distinction. I don't have a specific question, but I wanted to highlight the amounts in each track. And so given that track 1 is larger dollar projects, $10 million, you have to think about what realistically could you spend $10 million on in a 3-year time frame, right? That reduces the greenhouse gas emissions, or vice versa. What could you effectively, do the level of engagement at the $1 to $2 million level in the track 2? You have to be really strategic about how those funds could be used, but also realistically what can be spent. And so I think that's why the track 1 kind of lends itself more to kind of like the construction, or the equipment, the larger dollar inputs into environmental change. So I just wanted to highlight that for people and really be thinking about those. They're set up that way with purpose.
That's a great point, Nisha. And I think even for track 1 project, or yeah, track 1 projects, I think it's good to think about it maybe also potentially as multiple projects under a bigger umbrella. You can do lots of different things with that 10 million. It doesn't need to be like you taking $10 million and just retrofitting houses with them. That's really hard to do. But if you can, spend $5 million retrofitting housing, spend $1 million doing homeowner education, spend, 500,000 in support and community engagement around applying for another, like you can package lots of things together under an umbrella to help spend that money more effectively, because it's a lot. It's really hard to spend $10 to $20 million in 3 years in a small geographic area. So trying to diversify that a little bit can help. Any other questions out there?
I have a question. This is George Jones with Partners for Environmental Justice, Langston and Eliza. Liza. Two things. One, if you are working already in an existing EPA designated urban watershed.
If you are already working on EP, consider limiting the number of songs 2 to 9.
I'm sorry for that. I've got a background echo here talking to me. What potential opportunities are you able to work through if you already have sort of action plan strategies, you already have existing partners that are doing infrastructure improvements, and you're looking for ways to consolidate feasibility planning for areas where communities are really being impacted. So basically you have some of these elements under the climate pollution reduction model, but you don't necessarily have the planning assessment portion of that process in place. And so how could this be something where you're partnering with these other partners, but you're also able to implement the planning assessments for those communities? In other words, you meet the definition of disadvantage, you meet the definition of some of these other climate resiliency areas, and you also have an action plan focused on that area, but you don't have a full feasibility study to work with. Is that something that could be part of the overall shovel-ready model? Is that something you could put in place or get funded to support?
So I would say our understanding would be that that would not be what this grant opportunity is for.
Okay.
Did mention very quickly at the end that the EPA and Department of Energy have also set up their Environmental Justice Thriving Communities grant-making program. I'll put that link in the chat. And that is expected to come out this summer. And those grants will be for long-term planning, assessment, and feasibility of environmental justice projects. So if you are looking to, to hire consultants to do a kind of longer term study and planning for your area, that would be probably a better fit in terms of grant funding. Like Langston had kind of just stressed before, there is such a tight timeline that they're just looking for projects that can start building and purchasing and engaging. I think you have, after you're awarded, maybe 3 months to get started on what you're doing and not a lot of time to finish.
Thank you. And the last point I want to ask you, or last comment I want to bring is, if you're already a hub member of a Justice 40 model, how does that fit into what Liza, you're doing, and how does that roll into other, say, institutional partners that you have connections with?
Yeah, were you part of the accelerator program?
We became a member of the Southern, I think it's the Deep South Coalition for Climate Resiliency.
Oh, okay, great.
In Region 4. We're part of that, but I don't think we're exclusive to one partnership over the other. So that was just curious. I know the program that you're part of is something that we also want to be we're interested in learning more about, but didn't know whether you have to designate specific exclusivity to one initiative over the other.
No, we are happy to talk to and work with anyone as long as you are in a southern state. And yeah, we would be happy to connect. I will say though that having that background and being part of that community will help you in either this grant or any other federal grant coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, because there's a huge emphasis on commitment to Justice 40 initiatives and efforts. And so I think it will only help you if you do decide to apply for a federal grant.
Thank you.
Yeah, and George, yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, having those experiences are just huge benefits. The work that you all have done, shows your commitment to place, your ability to work with local governments and other partners. So I think, yeah, I understand it can be hard to find those projects, especially to spend this amount of money. But I think in many ways you all are set up really well. If you can find some way, you'd have to find some way to sort of piggyback these funds on what is already happening potentially, or things that have already been sort of planned or in the works. But yeah, I just wanted to say the work you've done is great, and I think makes you a really good candidate for a lot of these grants.
Thank you, Langston.
Give people another minute here if there's more questions. Again, just so people know, we'll be sending out this recording as well as a PDF of all of our slides. So you'll be able to access all that after the fact. Yeah, I know there's a lot here, a lot of information. Hard to, especially if this is the first time hearing about it, hard to soak it all in. But I really encourage you, if you even think that this is an interesting conversation to have, to reach out. I know a lot of local government folks are interested in thinking about this, regional governmental, nonprofit. Like this is a great conversation to have, again, even if you don't think that this is a perfect opportunity for you right now. So just wanted to put that plug in there one more time.
And speaking of that, Langston, so this is George Jones again. Just I'm curious in your thinking in terms of the two relationships. So if you're sort of a grassroots community-based organization, but you also have, established partners in the watershed, you also have established municipal partners and regional partnerships. How deep do you go into this model in terms of getting started? Like, where do you start? Obviously, we would not be the fiscal sponsor for funding this large, but what are some of what level of the partnership do you think about? Institutional partner or regional council? I'm just curious as to what that partnership has to look like to get started.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you want to have an organization that for this grant that can take in $10 million at least and can do, it feels comfortable doing sort of that financial back end work around reporting, sub-awarding. So tends to be bigger institutional organizations. And again, that can look really different depending on who you work with. Again, for you all, I mean, maybe that's the city of Raleigh. I'm not sure. For some people, it might be NCCU or UNC or Duke. It could be, bigger nonprofits, that have the capability and staff to do this. But having them just being able to do that basic work of like taking in this much money and feeling comfortable with the processes and doing that, I think is one of the first steps. And obviously the other first step is like having a community on the ground that knows, the community well, has connections in the community, and can help sort of bring the community piece to this project. I think those are the two essential. There's lots of other pieces that you can sort of bring in, conservation organizations, education, faith-based organizations that can all play a part. But I think it just really depends on the situation that you're working with. I don't know if that fully answered the question, but and Liza, feel free if you have any.
You gave me the roadmap. You just didn't say here's phase one, but I'm good. I can go from there. You can have it.
Well, I just think the other crucial kind of point is that when you're talking about federal grants and money this large, this would be a legal partnership, right? So you do have to kind of keep that in mind. But I think the first step in my experience is reaching out to your district representatives, your local representatives, and talking to them. And they're usually the kind of best way to get your foot in the door to a mayor or town manager or somebody who's running things. That's just my 2 cents. But somebody also put in the chat, would a community college be a qualifying partner? And definitely, yes.
Yes, we should know counties are great partners as well. Thank you, Tobin, from Durham County. So yeah, there's a lot of options there. But yeah, I think I agree with Liza. The first step is I think it's really reaching out to start the conversation. Just see whether people are interested, and start brainstorming on what this could look like or how you could make this type of funding work. It is just past 1. I'm fine staying on a little longer. Looks like we have another question. Obviously, if you need to log off, feel free. Thank you so much for being here, and feel free to reach out to either Liza or myself if you have more questions or want some help brainstorming. Yeah, Nisha.
This is not a question again. I just want to put a plug in, encourage people to apply. It seems like North Carolina in general has not received as much funding as, we could be receiving in the BIL. We've been very fortunate to have received some funding, but the opportunities are tremendous. In particular, as I look at recent awards and I'm thinking about how California and Washington State are racking up and how we are faring in comparison. It just seems to me like maybe we're not getting enough applications in. And so I just want to encourage people to apply.
I should note too. Thank you, Nisha. I didn't mention this in the presentation because it goes a little bit into the weeds, but another innovative part of this application process is if you apply, EPA will give you feedback and you can apply again with the same project. So there is an opportunity for a little bit of a sort of dialogue and back and forth around your application. So that's another thing about sort of just getting an application in. If it, you will, depending on how early you get it in, you will have an opportunity to resubmit potentially. So that can be a helpful part. If there's no more questions, we'll end here. Thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and the weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.